Hi, Dr. Abba. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm just wondering maybe if you wanted to give a little introduction to yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm Abba Tijani, and I'm the Director General of the National Commission for Museums and Monuments in Nigeria. I started in this position since the 1st of November 2020.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. So my first question for you is what was the process like receiving the bone and bronzes, particularly maybe from the Horniman Museum, or I know you've acquired them from Germany and all sorts of places. So maybe you'd like to talk about a bit like what that process was like.
Yeah, well, at the beginning, the process was bumpy because of, the expressions by many museums and countries as to, their own perception of this repatriation and what it means to them and how far can they go and the rest. Because we are talking about, Benin bronzes that have been stolen and under very unusual circumstances in 1897. And many museums have benefited. Many museums and countries have benefited from it. And so they feel that, when we start, how their fear is that their galleries and storage will be empty, and of course then it will also lead to other countries and institutions also, following suit from this, successful outing if it happens. So it's like, how do we go about it? But the what actually helped us is always our own position to be open and to be collaborative. So we have told them from the beginning, and we have expressed it clearly that this is for mutual benefit. So we are not out there to empty their galleries in the first place. We are there to correct the wrongs of the past. Wrongs of the past can be corrected if all the Benin bronzes, meaning Benin bronzes, we are referring to the artifacts from Benin, whether they are ivory or wood or other materials, that if all the Benin bronzes that were part of the loot of 1897, the British colonial forces, if they are ready to, uh, give the ownership to us so that we sign agreement that now Nigeria is the owner of these Benin bronzes, that will be a good beginning. So once we take the ownership of these artifacts, then that is unconditional. So we don't want any condition to be attached to this, because we are saying that there are some ethical and moral, perspective to it. So we don't want to put any condition to the, transfer of ownership of these bronzes to Nigeria. So once we now agree on this, then we can look at other options, meaning like loan agreements, research, joint exhibitions, and so on, and other forms of, professional partnership as museums used to do. So we were persistent on this, and many of our professional colleagues in those countries saw the benefits of this, and they started keying into this, and started reaching out to their board of trustees, to their respective government departments and and so on. So that was how we now started getting the attention of some of these museums that have agreed. But on the other hand, also, there are a lot of pressure from, individuals and groups to see that, Africa that, have been really affected by this, that they need to now, do something so that the African heritage that are, scattered around in Europe and US and other parts of the world are returned to their respective, countries of origin. So there was this growing, support, especially through the social media and so on. So I think that also played some role in, making, these museums to succumb to this, pressure. So I think it is, from different angles, but also on our part as well, we are looking at it also from the professional, perspective, that, it's ethical for museums to do the right thing. It is no longer tenable or acceptable, especially to the audience, to the public that visit these museums, to go and see objects on display that have been taken away from unusual circumstances that are not legal, that were forcefully taken, and so on. So people express themselves, and their discomfort to navigate through galleries that they see this kind of, objects on exhibit. So I think that also public opinion and also played a very important role in this as well. So that is how we our own, that we have studied some of them together, and some of them we know each other before, and so there's that rapport that we have developed over the years, and the confidence they have in the leadership, here, and so on, contributed a lot because, since 1977, when Nigeria hosted FESTAC, Festival of Arts and Culture, of African nations, Nigeria requested for one of the objects from British Museum, but they declined. So since that time, nothing happened, and I think today, for such kind of thing to start happening, is because of so many reasons that I mentioned.
Yes. So you talked a bit there about like ownership, and how that obviously that is a key part of the repatriation process. Does ownership also for you mean like the control over the narrative that's being told about these Ben and bronzes in like Western museums that hold them as well as the legal like aspect of that?
Yeah, our own persistence and position to say that we really want this transfer of ownership is because, one, we have to have a say in our objects whenever they are in any country or museum, how the stories are told, because we don't want to see our objects, being portrayed in a manner in which is not in tandem with our own history, with our own heritage here. So that's why we want first the transfer of ownership. So after the transfer of ownership now, if we give these objects on loan, we now have a say in the way in which these objects are displayed, which the stories are told, so that, we want to be seen to be sure that the stories that are told are correct and reflect the exact things that happen here in Nigeria. Let me give you an example. These Benin objects, many of them are not art for art's sake, because that's the impression the Western museums are having. The artistic genius, the skill, and and so on. And for us, that is secondary, because the primary purpose of these objects are functional. They are part of the history and culture of the people. It interprets what has been happening. in the communities, and sometimes these objects are part of, social obligations that, they play a very important role in either coronation of, the king or queen, or in some form of worship, or, in other professional capacity that these objects play. So they are part of the daily life of the people. So when you want to tell the story, now you now shield this part of the story, then it does not really tell the audience there what really, the functions of these objects are. That is one. And then secondly, we want to be seen to be recognized. It's just that the object is from Nigeria or from this community and so on. So once these objects are now owned by us, now we want to be seen to be told that in any of the exhibitions, the credit line should show that this object is on loan from us. So, and also any data that is going to accompany this object, or any digital data that is in existence, even prior to the transfer of ownership, will be also part of the ownership, because the objects. So therefore, we own such information, such data. So sharing such data or using it for any purpose must be, we must be involved. We have to be notified, and we have to agree to that, and all images as well. So that is how we want this. And of course, for us also, if these objects are back in Nigeria, I don't know whether I'm jumping your question, but also we want to see that our public here, that have not been able to see these objects for decades, will now be able to have access to these objects, and will be able to understand about their ancestors that have produced these objects and what they have used these objects for. But also, we want to tell the story that these objects have gone through different countries and continents. And these are the circumstances in which these objects have gone through, and so on. So we are not only telling the stories in isolation, that as if these objects have been in Nigeria for all this while. We want to tell the part of the story that these objects have gone around the world and eventually has returned back to Nigeria.
Just to go back to the repatriation, at the process of that, did you, when you were like having these like conversations with Western museums, how have you like found that like collaboration between yourselves and other Western institutions have, how like receptive have you found them to be, and how open have people been, would you say?
Well, the good thing is that all the museums that we have been to, including even the British Museum, when we go to sit down and discuss, they are very open. We are open, we are friendly, we are professionals. That is at the level at which we are talking. We are not talking as politicians. So we are talking as professionals in the field of museums. So we are open, we discuss, and in every discussion, our priority is the objects. What is good for the objects? How do we, because all these things that is circulating around the discussion is about, how the objects security, how the objects integrity and so on can be sustained. So there are many questions that have been asked by our colleagues as to our own capacity to look after these objects. The facilities that we have, are they good enough for these objects when they return, and so on. So a lot of these discussions surround, these kind of questions, but around these questions. But, what we always tell them is that, you are talking about, objects that are produced here in Nigeria, objects that have survived many decades before you came and interrupted and you are asking how we are going to look after these objects, and you are asking how can these objects survive, and whether the people are skilled, are professional to look after these objects. I said these are not questions, these are not relevant questions, because these objects have been even taken care of outside the context of museum for many decades, and they survived, and they were in good condition, excellent condition. So now you have interrupted this institution, you took away the objects, you kept them, and now when would the opportunity now arise for these objects to come back, you are asking, how we are going to look at it, whether we have the facilities. I said we have the capacity, we have the skill, we have the professionalism to look after our objects. If these objects come now, they are going to be in our museums because we want to avail our young generations for them to see these objects, that they have not been able to see for decades, because only a few people that travel abroad were able to see some of these objects. And let me tell you that in most of these museums that have large number of these objects, a mere 1% or less is on display. So what is happening to the rest? So those that had the opportunity to go and see these objects could only see this 1% or less of the objects on display. So the rest, they are not even aware of it because nobody had access to the storage. So if now we get these objects back, we want to commit this object to exhibition in Nigeria and also on travel exhibitions around the world, so that we will reach out to many audience, and also we want to make sure that where these objects are going to be are secured and modern facilities are available. That's why we have proposed building of new museums and storage facilities. All these are planned.
Yeah.
And we have said, that's why we are also saying that these transfers are going to be in phases, so that as we bring these objects, we make sure that we have where we are going to store these objects. So we will now want to say, okay, this is the number of objects in your facilities, in your museum, yes. So we can only bring back this number. The rest, you keep them for us until when we are ready, while some are on loan for you to display. So that is what we have been, negotiating and we have been agreeing on. For example, in Germany, we signed the agreement for the transfer of 1,130 Benin bronzes. And out of that, we only brought 22. So we are, facing them so that in a way that we will not want, for security reason, we cannot commit all our objects at one time, for shipment to Nigeria. If anything happens, it affects all the objects. So that's why we have to do them in batches, and also as when we have facilities to store these objects and to exhibit these objects. And that's what we have been doing. So I think many of our colleagues and museums saw that we are really open and we are professional and we are mindful of the safety and security of our objects. I think that is also an important aspect of trust, in our agreements.
Okay. Thank you. So what do you see for the future, like the Benin bronzes objects, like I said, on display in Nigerian museums, but obviously you also talked about access to communities there. So what do you, envision in terms of, the NCMM and like other museums to give, access?
Well, to be honest with you, we have, big, things, plans in mind. We are very optimistic that, what we are planning is going to work. And we have seen some kind of this project that worked in the past. So we have different levels of agreements and programs and projects that we want to carry out. And one of these is, for example, any of these objects that we bring to Nigeria, we want to do joint exhibition, with the countries where these objects are coming from, so that we will jointly curate these exhibitions. We just started with the Smithsonian Museum of African Art just before the previous director resigned. So we are looking forward to a substantive director that will continue this project. So the objects that are returned from the Smithsonian, we want to now do a joint exhibition with some of the objects that we have in Nigeria, in Benin, so that we will now co-curate, this exhibition. So we are still collaborating. And then we also have another level of exhibition here in Nigeria, where we want to commit some of these exhibitions on a travel exhibition within Nigeria, so that Nigerians in different parts of the country will be able to see and access these objects and understand these objects that have been away from the country for many decades. Then we also have a plan to engage some of these objects on travel exhibition around the world, so that one is not just to enable people to see these objects, and understand the importance of these, Benin bronzes and their own context of usage, but also their own artistic genius and so on. But also is partly to also generate revenue, because if you see, all our discussions are centered around the return of our object.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of questions have been asked about, compensation and so on. And we have been saying that our main interest is the object. We want to first see that these objects are back to Nigeria. We own these objects. We have many ways of generating revenue. These objects are international, recognition. And many countries and continents want to see these objects. So we can commit these objects on travel exhibitions that can also generate revenue for us. And then we can improve on our infrastructure as well. So these are other areas that we are going to look at. And we also have, in all our agreements that we sign, we not just sign transfer of ownership, but we also key in some collaborations, like joint research collaboration, exchange of staff, skill acquisitions, capacity building. All these are built into our agreements, because we believe that there's a lot to learn still about the Benin bronzes. There's a lot of research that need to be done for us to understand, these objects. And also, we believe that skill acquisition is not one way. So even in the West, they need to understand our own perspective of, the iconography and also the study of these objects. So they can learn a lot from us, and even our own exhibition style, because in the West, objects are displayed and there is a label there and so on. But we feel that these objects have their context of usage, and they are better explained when you contextualize it. So there is a lot of this approach that is missing in Western museums, and they will be able to also learn from us. So we build in all these aspects into it, and also we build in these loan agreements as well. So there is a lot, that is going to happen, as we move on to the future.
Yes. So what would you say the exhibition style is? Obviously, you're taking different approach here, but what is that approach? What do you envision for that?
Well, because the objects are either ceremonial objects, some of them, or are either objects of power, authority, or they are of religious purpose, or probably for domestic use, and so on. So there are many, things involved. So when you now come and display an object, sometimes the labels that describes these functions are not vivid. And of course, sometimes people don't have the time to read labels, the details. So, but when these objects on display have some elements of accompanying, stories, then it gives you a better understanding of the objects, and the object is contextualized. If it is used for ceremonial purposes, how is it, what is its function within the ceremony? eh? What is its role, and so on. So these are things that are missing, in the, that has been, and of course, if you see these, some of these objects, they have some iconographical, representations, and interpretation of those iconography is something that requires, skills, and of course, contextualizing those iconographic symbols, because each symbol has a story. So that is why, if you look at an ivory, has a lot of, inscriptions, and those inscriptions are stories. And if you look at the plaques also, they are not on their own. They are part of a group of plaques that tells stories. So if you display one plaque, you are not, conveying the message. All things that are missing in the Western exhibition, and these are things that we believe that, we have the capacity and the knowledge, to contribute in any exhibition.
Great, thank you. Do you think you see the objects being used again, like in ceremonies, like physically?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
they are.
yeah.
They are physically part of a ceremony, because
Mm,
if you see any chief,
mm,
or member of the royal family participating in any festival or coronation, you see that he has a symbol, and that is a symbol of authority,
mm,
but also a symbol of protection and other, things. So it's probably not just one object. So you can,
yes.
if you don't contextualize it, you will not get an understanding of what is going to happen. And also, you have, for example, the Oba has his own shrine, and in his shrine there is a kind of story to tell. So there are certain objects that play an important role, and ancestors are key. So, and how do you interpret these ancestors? Representation of the ancestors. All these things are, part of a function. So we want to see exhibition of objects as much as possible in situ, so that the original function of this object is also portrayed in in the exhibition.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So do you sort of talked a bit about like the collaboration between museums like across across Nigeria. Obviously, like the sustainability aspect of repatriation is clearly key. Yeah. So I wondered like how you maybe could go into that a little bit more. Um, like what you see.
You mean within Nigeria?
Mm,
Yeah, we Nigeria, we have different types of museums.
mhm,
We have the national museums, and we have 54 national museums across Nigeria, in almost every state of Nigeria. So we these are national museums under the National Commission for Museums and Monuments. We manage the exhibition. We
mhm,
manage everything. So any exhibition that we do can travel from one museum to the other. So it's
mhm,
part of the family of
mhm,
NCMM. So this is a way of reaching out to, the communities. But we also have, private museums and galleries in Nigeria. So we are open to collaboration with private museums and galleries, so that at the moment, for example, we have some private galleries that have our objects on loan. So we are also collaborating with them so that they will be part of the the institutions that will reach out to a wider audience. And we believe that when we expand our outreach, the better for us, so that we will be able to reach all parts of the country, so that they know that these objects are coming back to Nigeria and they are there for them to physically see these objects. And also, we have state museums owned by the state. We operate a federal system. So since we operate a federal system, states have their own museums. So we can collaborate with states also to extend this partnership as well. And also, we have corporate museums as well. So we have agencies, corporate organizations and so on that have their own, individual museums. So we also collaborate with such, corporate museums. So that is how we want to see that we collaborate and we tell the stories, from different, different institutions, so that will be as much as possible we reach to a wider audience that have been denied, this opportunity for over 125 years.
Okay, great, thank you. So with the objects on the display themselves, you talk a bit about in your article about repatriation that it's really important for the Nigerian identity to have your objects back. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, especially since they're traveling around, and they're also, when they travel around within Nigeria, but also in the world, on the world stage, how you see that.
Well, it's very important for not only us as Nigerians, but also globally, people to understand, people's background, cultural heritage and history. And one of the ways to do that is through our cultural representations, our artifacts, and so on, and of course our architecture and the environment, mode of dressing, our own way of cooking and so on. So there are many ways to tell stories about yourself, about your identity. And these artifacts are one of the significant representations of our identity, of who we are. In any country, any independent country aspires to show its identity and also recognize with its identity, and also sells its identity. So we want to show our youth here in Nigeria, in the first instance, that a cultural identity that we're proud of. We have a cultural identity of representing our way of life. We have a cultural heritage that tells our story. We have our cultural heritage that will bring peace and progress in our community. So many of the artifacts tells us stories about what we will become, who we are, how we are going to live, peacefully amongst ourselves. And if we can portray this to our youth, many of these social vices nowadays, of drug addiction, of kidnapping, of so many of these social ills that permeate in our society would have been reduced. Because there is many of these things is also advocated through lack of understanding of our differences, lack of expression of our cultural representations. So when we understand about our culture, because Nigeria is a multicultural society, and for us to coexist, we need to understand ourselves, to understand other people's culture and way of life, so that, and it's a multi-religious country, so we need to understand our religion and respect the religion of others, so that we will be able to, live in harmony. So that is what we want to now portray through our exhibitions, to promote, cultural harmony, coexistence, and to live peacefully. So these are the kind of things we want to advocate in our exhibition, because many of these objects represent, peaceful coexistence, tolerating other people's culture, and so on. So, and then beyond Nigeria, we want to tell the story that we are unique people. We have our history, we have our heritage, and we respect our culture and tradition. We respect our elders, and we have artistic traditions that goes back to many decades. And within Nigeria, we are also multicultural. And we have so many of our objects that are unique. You can see, when you see a Benin object, is different from Ife, and it's different from Ibo Uku, and it's different from Nok, and so on. So you can see that we have unique traditions that prosper over centuries. And therefore, we tolerate this over the years, and that is how we lived, peacefully. So we want to tell this story to the communities out there, globally, so that they can understand our culture and also respect our own, position, our own culture and our own heritage. So these are the kind of things that we want to, portray when we take our objects abroad, and within Nigeria and abroad for exhibition.
Yeah, that's great. So just another thing I'd like to pick up on is you mentioned how history of the object itself sort of moving throughout the world after this, like the stealing and the looting, is also something that will be, incorporated into the exhibition of the objects. So I just wondered if you wouldn't mind like explaining that a bit, and also how you see that fitting into the story of like the history of the objects and the use of them, and how important that is as well.
Well, it's very difficult to describe this approach, because it's something that has to be curated. It's something that you have all the, supporting documents, and pictures, visual and audio and so on, before you can now bring them together and put them into a one, storyline. But as also as a museologist, I would like to just give you a few hints on this, because if we now see a group of objects that has traversed different countries, at one point these objects were taken during the punitive expedition of 1897. How did this object arrive in the West? So they were looted and taken by the British colonial soldiers, either through Liverpool or through whatever point of entry to those countries. And what happened from there, they were either given as, to gain recognition or position, from their masters, or they are given because they are part of, war boot, and it could be that some of them kept them in their private, as part of their private collections. So, and then from there, what happened, and some of them were auctioned in auction houses. We have the documents of all these objects that were being auctioned. So, and then from there, where did it go? To what museum? And even when these objects are in those museums, were they on exhibition? Were they in storage? If they were in exhibition, how many different exhibitions? Were they also given on loan, to other museums to exhibit? All this will form part of any exhibition. So we're now going to look at how we would present it, either through video, audio, or audiovisual, and some of them through text. So there are so many approaches, and we'll look at the best way, because when you do your exhibition, you look at the audience. Now, how much can the audience carry, and how much understanding they can gain from this? So you can, it depends on the kind of people that you are doing this exhibition. So when these exhibitions are going round, it might be changing because of the different, part of the country and how they see these objects, how they can, understand this storyline and the rest. So we don't want to miss all these things. We want to do it in a way that we curate it meticulously, so that we will present the story as much as possible, so that it will not be boring, and it will be something that can be interactive, and it's something that can easily be catchy, because our young generations are very much into this, interactive, engagements, either through their handsets, all these things. So we want to avail them the opportunity, so that they will be able to access all these things through different formats.
Okay, thank you so much. So I'll just ask one final general question just to wrap up here. But what do you see for the future of repatriation? How are you feeling about it, as it stands in 2023, this process,
I mean, and as you can see, the issue of repatriation, some decades ago has been a no-go area. It's something that many museums and countries resisted, and nobody expected that repatriation would have advanced at this level. Now, because a lot has happened. Many countries and museums have been reaching out to us, and we have a number of countries and museums to go in 2024 to sign agreements, and I see that this area of repatriation is going to be a global issue, and it's something that is going to be a focus for many museums. I think many museums are ready to correct the ills of the past. And I think that there are few countries that are trying to drag back this, speeding train. And I think it's not going to happen. And in particular, if you look at the United Kingdom, as much as, antiquity is in the UK is something that, the British government is very much, interested in. It's an area that, they jealously guard, and you can see how it started with Cambridge and Aberdeen, and then Honeyman and so on. So you can see now it's really going and on and on and on. And I think the British Museum has to adjust. And I think the issue is not with British Museum, to be honest, is with the act of the Parliament. The British Museum, as we are interacting with them, they are open, and they want to discuss. But their hands are tied because of the act of Parliament. So I think the parliamentarians have a responsibility. Really, they have a responsibility to live up to this century, that things are not like what they used to be. They need to open up, and I think the fear that the British Museum will be emptied if this issue of repatriation gain momentum, I think is not correct. Many museums and institutions and countries that want their artifacts to be repatriated will still want to negotiate and see that some of their objects remain at the British Museum, and the British Museum will be more ethically organized in a way that they will have the confidence of to invite their audience, the public, to come and see objects that are on display, that are on loan, not just objects that are subject of loot or forceful, forcefully brought to the British Museum. So I think things are really going to look good in the coming years.
That's great. Thank you so much.